My name is Councillor Mary Lee, Councillor for Darnell Ward, and I'm the Chair of the Local Area Committee. So before I ask other councillors to introduce themselves, I'd like to hand over to Democratic Services, who will talk about the housekeeping arrangements for today. So, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Please can I request that mobile telephones and other such equipment are switched to silent mode as to not disturb the conduct of the meeting. There is no fire test planned for today. If there is an emergency evacuation, please take instruction from the council staff present. The toilets are through the blue doors in the corner. The meeting today is open to the public and will be streamed live and for subsequent broadcast via the council's website. You should be aware that the council is a data controller under the Data Protection Act. Data collected during this webcast will be retained in accordance with the council's published policy. By entering the meeting room, you are consenting to being filmed. That's all, thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Okay. Can I ask people on the table to introduce themselves, first of all?
J. Bell, Democratic Service Officer.
Hi everyone, I'm Huda Ahmed. I'm the Local Area Committee Manager for the East Lack, and as you know, East Lack covers 4 wards: Manor Castle, Arbourthorne, Richmond and Darnell wards.
Thank you. And could I ask councillors to introduce themselves? Everybody's dispersed on tables and I can't see them, so I can see Ben over there. You want to kick off, Ben?
Apologies, I've got my mouth full with the wonderful food. I'm Councillor Ben Miskell. I am one of the councillors that represent Park and Arbourthorne ward, and I'm sat on a table with some wonderful people. Francis, I think, with Jane, Fumed, I think. Fumed, lovely to see you. Valerie, Katrina and Andy as well, so lovely to see you.
Thank you, Ben. And Laura?
I'm Laura Moynihan. I'm the Councillor for Manor Castle.
Mia? Sahira somewhere?
Hi everyone. My name is Sahira Naz. I'm a councillor for the Darnell ward.
I can't see anybody else, so we are expecting other councillors. 2 of them are going to be a little bit late, so they will be here very, very shortly, hopefully. So I'll go through some of the business of the meeting first, and I'll just tell you what's going to happen. We'll do some of the business of the meeting that councillors need to go through with the manager of the LAC, and then we're going to break out into workshops to discuss Sanctuary Housing Association and antisocial behaviour in the area. So I'm going to ask you if you've got any questions on those 2 issues, ask them round the table whilst we've got all the relevant officers and staff together to answer those questions. So please ask those questions now. If there's anything else you want to ask that's outside the workshops, so it's not associated with the work of the workshops, please ask them under public questions, which will be at the end of the meeting. Okay. So I'll just take apologies for absence.
Chair, received apologies from Councillors Qais, Al-Ahdal, Elle, Dodd, Mike Drabble and Terry Fox.
Okay. Are there any items that we need to exclude the press and public for?
No.
No? Oh, any declarations of interest from councillors? No? So just so we take the minutes of the previous meeting, which was in November last year, can I ask members to approve the minutes? I take in silence that they are approved. Thank you. And I'm going to now hand over to Huda, who will give our budget report.
Thank you, Chair. So in your tables, there should be like this report, and it explains the agenda and the minutes and so on. But our elected members have already seen a copy of this. So if you go to page 13 of the report, there's an explanation about how we've spent the 100,000 what was allocated to local area committees. All I'm asking you to do today is note the recommendations are on page 18. These are for elected members. And then on page... the reason that the 100,000 that we get allocated, what we've done is we've spent that 100,000 on the priorities that local resident told us that we need to concentrate on. And the priorities that we've got are in page 16, if you want to have a look. And they are priorities on children and young people, health and well-being, transport and highways, environment, communities and neighbourhoods, community safety and crime. And on appendix, where it says appendix 1, page 19, it gives a description of how we've allocated that 100,000 as from February 2025, because we've not spent it, we've got a bit more money left. So all I'm asking you to do as elected members is to approve and note the recommendations that are on page 18, unless anybody's got any questions.
Okay, so we can see the recommendations. This is just to members. Are they approved? Yes. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to ask Huda now we're going to break into the workshops, but I'm going to ask Huda if she can just explain what we're going to do today. And we've got a really massive turnout, and it's going to get a bit noisy, but, you know, please enjoy yourselves. Thank you.
So we've got 2 workshops today, and the reason we've selected these 2 workshops is based on feedback that we've had from Alpthorne residents. Alpthorne residents have said they want to talk and share some of their opinions and concerns to sanctuary housing. So we're going to have a workshop on sanctuary housing. And the other concern that residents told us about was about concerns they've got about antisocial behaviour. So we've got officers that are placed on the table to talk about antisocial behaviour. Now, before we break into those workshops, what I want to do first is introduce, to just give you first a brief description about what they do. So I want to introduce, just to give for a kind of 5-minute description of sanctuary housing, is introduce a new manager called Katrina Sulvak. Pronounced it wrong. So if you want to come over here, or you can stand there, just give us a brief description, and then I'll do the same with antisocial behaviour after Karina presented, done a brief presentation. Thank you.
Hi everybody, I'm Katrina Sherlock. I'm the new area manager for sanctuary housing. I've only been in post for 4 months, so you'll have to bear with me. I've taken over Greg Rippon. So I'm Matt's meters manager. So we've been working quite closely together the last 4 months, haven't we, Matt, to do walk round the estate. And yeah, so obviously, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so as well as Katrina sat on those 3 tables at the back, we've got Wendy Banks, who's the head of neighbourhoods for Sanctuary, neighbourhood operations. We've got somebody called Andy Naylor, he's the senior maintenance surveyor. And then we've got somebody called Yusuf Jawad, he's the senior asset surveyor. And then Matthew Meets, and maybe some of you have already met Matthew, he's the housing officer. So they'll sit back on those 3 tables, they'll have the workshop talking about sanctuary housing for probably half an hour or so, maybe more, and then they'll come back and then they'll swap round and sit in the front table. So don't worry if you're thinking, I want to talk about housing sanctuary, and you'll get your chance to talk about that. Okay, so the other thing is, just let me introduce you to the antisocial behaviour team. So the antisocial behaviour team, I've got Damon Pass. Is Damon here? Do you want to kind of just come and tell us a brief description about what you do, and then I'll introduce the team and I'll explain a bit more. Sorry. Thanks, Damon.
Hi everyone, I'm Damon Pass. I'm a Safer Neighbourhood Coordinator working for Sheffield City Council, but I spend a lot of my time working with the neighbourhood policing team. I met you all before a couple of years ago, so I'll be with you for the duration of this meeting. Anything I can assist with, my role's mainly around crime, criminal exploitation of children, threat, harm and risk, hotspots, more serious antisocial behaviour, so I'm around if I can help in any way. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Damien. Okay. The other officers that are here that work on antisocial behaviour and crime, if you like, obviously the police are here. We've got Keely Fawcett, Kurt Beckett and Liz Wilson, who's the sergeant for this area, rolling their back. And then obviously we've got Damon. And then in the antisocial behaviour team, we've got Amanda Parrott. She's the Operational Development Manager for Sheffield City Council. And then we've got Matt Sutton, who's the Service Manager, who also deals with antisocial behaviour, but in the housing team. And then in addition to the antisocial behaviour team, we've got 2 sustainable officers that work in community safety. They're all sat over there. One's called Shakil Ramzan and then Zahid Ahmed. So if those officers, if you can spread through sit in these 3 tables, and then you are going to talk about antisocial behaviour, you're going to listen to the tenants and the councillors. If I can ask you just to make some notes, if that's okay, because I think we're short of note takers, if that's okay with people. And so you'll have 30 minutes or so, these 3 tables here at the front to talk about antisocial behaviour, and then those 3 tables at the back to talk about sanctuary housing, and then we'll swap round. The officers will swap round. Okay, does that make sense? Yeah? Does everybody know what they're doing? Yeah. Okay? So if you want, if Amanda, if you sit there, and then maybe Matthew sits there, and the police, if you go, spread yourself out in those tables, is that all right?
How long have we got? How long have we got?
I think about 30 minutes each.
30 minutes each.
Yeah, maybe.
It's bingo after that. Thank you. So we're going to take feedback from Matthew. I think he's over there. Matthew, do you want to raise your hand? Okay. So you've been discussing antisocial behaviour. You've been around those tables where that's been discussed. Do you want to start giving us some feedback about just general points that people raise with you? Yeah.
Is that? Well, so it probably won't be a surprise for everybody that the main issue that people touched on with us was the issue of the off-road bikes, and the damage that they cause to the grass, the risk that it poses to people as they're moving about, the intimidation, and the general frustrations around the bikes. There's a couple of little bits and pieces that, from a Sheffield City Council housing perspective, I was able to pick up and take back, where we can look into specific cases, but mainly the feedback that we've heard is the bikes, really. So I hope that's helpful.
Thank you. Abby, you the same theme.
Oh, sorry, this lady said cars as well.
So very quickly, antisocial behaviour, we had issues again with motorbikes, using footpaths, 4x4s, we talked about some solutions, also issues around litter and fly tipping, And then an issue around burglaries, and that being particularly at the moment with car thefts, and looked at some solutions there. And then with sanctuary housing, again, with the off-road bikes, designing out crime, they've had some quotes for the hard landscaping to prevent off-road vehicles, issues around non-residents getting inside communal areas, so a few issues with antisocial behaviour with teenagers, so looked at some possible solutions around that, like detached youth work, and then thefts from the bin stores and the buggy stores, and there may have been other things that I've missed.
Thank you. Has anybody else got anything to feedback on antisocial behaviour? Can I just feedback from my table then first? I'll just do mine and I'll come back to whoever it is. Off-road bikes, again, a big problem, and some of them have no lights, so quite dangerous for not just themselves but for other people, particularly people who are driving. Cars racing round on some of the roads around here. Kids breaking into sanctuary housing, or young people breaking into the sanctuary housing buildings. Dogs running around the streets, fly tipping, and again, going back to dogs fouling the streets. Those are the main issues that we discussed at our table. And then there was a few individual issues that I'll not go into now, but the police officer took note of those. The other person? Right, thanks. Anybody else on antisocial behaviour? No? So, sanctuary housing? Oh, yes. You at the back. Sorry, say that again? So is it pavements and grass verges? Yeah. I'm not sure who deals with that one. Is it police or council? Sometimes it varies depending on who wants to duck the job. Right, we'll make notes of the problems you just highlighted, and you mentioned Granville Road, but if there's other roads, can you tell us after the meeting, and we'll make sure that gets reported. Okay, thank you very much. Anybody else want to report on antisocial behaviour? We've said that one, yeah, we've done that one. Any of the note takers? What about sanctuary housing then? We've had something from Abby on this table. But anybody else want to share what the people have said? This table here at the front was top. Oh, was it yours? Okay, oh, thanks. And I think that's it for feedback. Okay, thanks
Sorry. Just in terms of what we're going to do next, because I don't want people to come to think, oh, we've had a little chat and nothing gets happened, because I think people fed back to us that, you know, we've had these conversations before and then nothing happens. What we're going to do as a local area committee working with our elected members is we will take on the notes that you've put together, and we will make sure that the relevant services get to see those notes. And one of the things that we do is kind of change those services to make sure things are happening. What we also do, that maybe residents don't know about, is that we, every 2 months, Sophie, who covers this area, Sophie O'Brien, you probably already know her, she gets together with elected members, different services, and as a community action group, and then we invite housing associations, we invite people from the police and children's services and so on, and then we talk about those 6 priorities that I mentioned at the very beginning, and then we decide what we're going to do. How do we make sure that things are happening and that you know, things are moving on, and that all your concerns that we've heard today are kind of you know, put forward and making sure that people are working on them. So I don't want, that's all I wanted to say. I didn't want you to think, oh well, like some people have said, oh, we've done this before, nothing's happened. And just to reassure you that we will try our very, very best to make sure that things happen for you. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
On housing, central government always seems to send more money down south than up north. And this current party's got a meeting for 7 months. Over the last 14 years, the vast amount of I know for a fact now, no house of more like I got, £8 a month. I was earning money, within 3 weeks I earned a year's mortgage.
Okay, thanks. I will agree with you about the last government and where the money went, and a lot of it did go down south. As you know, the government now got plans to build another 1.5 million houses over the next few years, and they put in the structures in place so that can be achieved. I don't know if Ben's here wants to mention what's happening in Sheffield. Has he gone? Okay, so we have got something called the local plan. That's going to go through a special meeting of the council in a few weeks' time. I think it's in May, and that will tell developers where we can build houses, where we can build businesses, where we can build industry. And once that's in place, then we'll have a good plan for Sheffield, and it's our ambition to build more houses. So, you know, that is on the cards. And I know at the moment, we're in this very difficult situation, and I don't want to get into it. It's not the local area committee's role to get into defence of the country, but I do take your point about that we know we do need to spend more on defence. I think that's absolutely the right thing to do. Moving into public questions. So this is anybody who wants to ask a question that's not related to antisocial behaviour or sanctuary housing, if there's any questions people would like to ask. And this goes on the record. And we'll answer them if we can, or you'll get a written response. Yes?
Hello, it's Jenny Patient. I live in Derby Street. I'm in Healy Community Tara. We're just interested in there's some cycle storage options being developed by the council, which are cycle hangers that can be parked on the street, and then people can pay a subscription to store their bikes. It doesn't sound like there's a lot of demand appeared in this area yet. I understand as a cyclist with big hills, it's not always the easiest place to cycle. But what I noticed around where I am is it's quite a quiet street, and there's a lot of families have bikes, but it's flats, maisonettes, and families don't have anywhere to store the bikes, and they don't want to store them on the walkways because of the fire hazard. So, but if you were a family with a couple of kids' bikes, you're not necessarily going to want to pay £72 a year to store each one. So our Tara was asking the question of whether there's some other alternative, which in areas where there's lots of flats or even terraced houses, you could have more communal cycle storage that was made available at sort of a lower rate, perhaps to council tenants or to low-income families, to encourage people to cycle. Kids are encouraged to cycle at school. They have cycling schemes going into the school, but then they come home and they can't really have a bike because there's nowhere to store it. And it would be a good move towards less traffic on the roads if more people learnt to ride a bike and could use the increasingly good cycle facilities in the city.
Okay, so yeah, there is a plan obviously to increase cycling in the city generally, and the infrastructure is going in for that now and in the future. Ben Miskell, who's had to leave, he's left to go to meet with the cycling forum in Sheffield, so that's where he's off to now. But I've seen those cycling, what do they call them? Hangers. Yes, I have seen them, and there is demand in some areas, but not so much in others. So if there's a demand where you live, maybe we need to let Ben know, and he can then pass on to the relevant officers. And you made a point about council housing and whether there could be a reduced cost of some kind for people in council housing. We can ask that question as well. And if you've got a particular location in mind, then we can pass that on to Ben. Or maybe we must have
something that the Tara could apply to this LAC to actually get some funding to try that kind of thing out, or
well, we wouldn't pay continued revenue for anything,
right?
But I can't remember what the cost of the hangers were, but I have seen.
£72 a year per bike. So I think that's not going to be affordable for families with more than one bike, you know. So it's just about a different alternative approach that could be used in those areas with lots of flats.
Yeah, take your point. So we'll take your details at the end, and we'll pass that on to Ben and the relevant officers. Thanks. Anybody else got a public question? It's a question, not a comment. I'm interested in now. Just a question.
The defence of this country.
Hey, you speak up. You speak up, mate. You have your say.
Shh. Can we just listen to what the question is? Please, if I can answer a question on the defence of the country, I will do, but I'm not sure that I can. Go on.
I'm saying I don't think we can defend it because we haven't got enough money, because if there's a third world war, Russia would sink this country. It's 120,000 square miles, and I don't think we can defend it.
Okay. Is there a question in there?
That's the question. I want you to say, am I right or wrong? It's the question which I'm saying. I don't think we have enough money to defend this country.
Okay.
So
you've mentioned it, and that's why we've put that we have increased the spending on defence. It was announced yesterday, and that's all I'm going to say, because I've got no expertise on defence, no more than yourself or anybody else in the room, unless we've got someone who's an expert.
Can everybody hear me? Yeah. So, Margaret is a sanctuary resident. She lives in Arborthorne and she's a part of the Tara. There is a broken street light within the sanctuary car park in the flats, is that right? Yeah. Yeah, just outside. And she would like to know whether it would be Highway's responsibility or Sanctuary's responsibility to repair that light. I have said that I'll investigate and do some digging for her, but if anyone can answer that question now, that would be really helpful.
Has anybody got an answer from Sanctuary Housing? It's... Okay, so let's... Yeah. Okay.
There's two ladies over there that have just confirmed that... Is it council? Right, okay. I will make sure I get Margaret's address before we go and I'll report that. Okay.
Hey, so
thank you.
Thanks for raising that. I think it's really important, especially if it's not been completed. Obviously, Sophie's got your details. If there's anybody over there who's got a similar situation, we'll get that information at the end of the meeting and we'll make sure it gets back to the relevant service in the council as a matter of urgency. We'll mention that in the communication that it's an urgent situation because of the antisocial behaviour and everything else that's happening. Any other questions? Yeah.
Yeah, Mary, I'd just like to ask how many people in this room are cyclists? Put your hands up. 2, 3, 4. 4, 5 cyclists, and we're prioritising a lot of money in cycling in this city. The people in this room are the most important in this city, and we should be putting more money into the communities. And there's a lot of money spent in the city centre where there's millions and millions adrift in the budget expenditure, doing these projects through Ben Miskill that aren't really, yeah, they look pretty, but it's not helping our people out in Sheffield. And that's my point.
Thank you for mentioning that. There are cyclists in the city, and we do want to increase cycling. We know we've got a climate emergency, and everything that we can do to address that is really, really important. As far as some of the...
Net zero, though, the net zero issue is not...
Can I answer the question? Can I answer the question? So in terms of some of the projects that you may be referring to, you're talking about maybe the Dutch roundabout, that wouldn't have been done unless we'd got a grant. The council wouldn't have the money to do that. If we hadn't got the grant, it wouldn't have happened. So, you know, so it's only because we've got a special grant from the government that was enabled that to be done. Otherwise, it would have that roundabout would have been the same as it was before the new roundabout was put in. Well, we'll have to pass that to the...
Yeah, they shouldn't be paying for their parking to go to work and keep all us lot healthy. Right, that's another thing. Okay, now, it's all right batting these questions off and saying, oh, well, we're not here to answer this and we're not here to answer that. But that's the whole point of LAC meetings, to bring these things up. People need to speak up for these local residents, and it's not happening at the moment. And this is why we're attending these meetings, because we're going to speak up, and as the public, we will not be silenced.
Well, we've held this public meeting today for people in this area because they've raised issues with their local councillors, and we wanted to theme this meeting around the issues that local people have raised with us, and that's why we've talked about the things we've talked about today, and this is why we're having a section on public questions so people can raise any issues. Some questions and some we'll have an answer to, some we won't have an answer to today, but we can get you some. Some have been more comments than questions, which we can agree or not agree with. In terms of cycling, there is money, again, from government that comes not from the council's coffers, it's from government to put in cycling infrastructure. And there are a lot of cyclists in the city, particularly maybe in some areas. And younger people are as important as anybody else as well. And I know there's a lot of older people here who've got their own issues, and that, again, this is what this public meeting's been about, because people have raised it with us. So, Laura, you wanted to say something?
I've got a...
Yes.
I've never been accused of not having a big gob, so I think we do want to hear you, and I've got a lot of sympathy for what you say about NHS staff, but it's not something we can do. We can make representations to the health authority. You know, the Northern General Hospital control the parking on their side, and residents around the councillors around the Northern General get loads of complaints from residents because the parking is all on their streets. So I think, you know, the hospital trust has got a big role to play here. It's not something we alone can do, but I know that councillors in those areas around the hospitals and around the Broom Hill and everywhere do make representations and have conversations about it. So it isn't something, if it was down to me, all NHS workers would get free parking.
I think some of the hospitals do a bus, don't they, for NHS workers?
Yeah, but they do from one hospital to another. But if you're working a shift, it's not always practical. And I've got relatives who work in the NHS, and they also have to go out in their cars to people as well. And it's just not possible when they go back to the hospital base to park. So there is issues. And if it was down to me, I really would do that.
Well, that's the same for the police. Well, there's not car parks for the police.
Can we? It is an issue.
Oh, I know that, but I'm just saying in general there's not enough space to park, and that's why cycling and public transport is surely important for everybody.
Okay. Can I just make an announcement? A taxi waiting for either a gentleman or a lady, somebody called either Alex or Alice. So if you called Alice or you called Alex, your taxi's outside waiting for you. So I'm just going to say that and leave it at that. Any other questions?
I'd just like to raise something here, like that guy said about city centre, spending all that money, millions and millions and millions. You go on Sheffield Moor, go down Fargate, you see like 6 or 7 blocks who use flies the best way to call them, picking tap ends up, and yet streets down estates is like backstop tip. And why can't they move up onto estates and clean all this one instead of looking up more and down Fargate? What's that then? You're scratching them out. The thing that
Okay, so Amy look after our streets and our highways, and what you've said is really important. We know we have issues with litter, and we have issues with fly tipping and tab ends if they're there as well. We've got issues with that. Obviously, the city centre is important. We want to keep that clean. We want to make sure that our city is really a showcase, and people look to Sheffield and see it as a really good city to be, and that brings in investment. So keeping the city centre clean is important as well. But I take your point about any litter around here. Somebody's mentioned it on my table in terms of antisocial behaviour, and it is antisocial behaviour. So we'll raise that as an issue, and your local councillors are here now. If you've got areas in this area, if you've got streets in this area which are problematic, we've got Nabeela, Mowlana there, at the end there, and I think Mia's still here. They can take those. We can pass that on to them. If you want to speak to them after this meeting about particular streets that are problematic, then let's do it that way. It depends on the buildings. If they're council buildings, we will absolutely clean them, and we have a time scale for that. If they are private buildings, if they're not public buildings, if they're not our buildings, then it is not our job to clean those buildings. It's our job to make sure that the owners of those buildings clean any graffiti off. So we can speak to them, we can write to them, and at some point, I think, I'm not sure about this, but if anybody's here wants to correct me, then we might be able to enforce some action on their part. So if it's private buildings, it's up to that private owner. It's not for the council to spend public money on private buildings to clean their buildings, but definitely our own buildings we do respond within a certain length of time. I don't know what the paper is, so I don't. Absolutely, and I've just said how we deal with it. If it's a public building, a council building, we will deal with it. If it's not a council building and the private owners don't clean it up, then we can take action to ask them to clean it up in the first instance. Okay. Well, it is. You can go to your councillors and come to the council and say this building is in a mess, and we will say, well, if it's ours, we'll do it. We'll then contact the owners and ask them to do it. Any other questions? Any other questions? Yeah, Mia?
Mine's not really a question, but following on from that, I'm very keen to start a litter pick in this area. So if anyone is wanting to bring that with me or has any suggestions of where we need to go.
Then you go back to that. See someone on board. Then you probably £400 or £500 a week. Now you want just to live it out.
Well, I'm just saying I'm going to do it. So. Yeah.
Well, we do have a lot of litter picking groups across the city. Everywhere across the city there's litter picking groups, and a lot of volunteers happily come out to do that kind of work. Well, I wish we could come out every day and clean the streets, but we can't do that.
Mary, could I just say something? Thank you. Yeah, Mary, in regards to all this litter picking stuff, surely it goes back to what you learn as being a youngster. It's about, you know, looking after your country, and it's about looking after your community. So when you start having to pick up rubbish as a youngster, and even, you know, if you join the forces or anything like that, every morning you do area cleaning. But I'll tell you what, when you see people dropping rubbish in your area, you're the first person then to say, listen, don't be dropping that, we'll end up picking it up. Now, we need to get back to basics and doing things in schools like that, and it starts with the small things getting done. And there's got to be proper repercussions for all these things. A lot of these young people don't see any repercussions because we have gone too far in one direction, and that's why they know that there's not going to be any repercussions. So we've got to get back to them basics. That's what I'm trying to say.
I think you're right. I think there's many ways to tackle litter and fly tipping, and some of them are about educating young people. But let's face it, it's not always young people that drop litter. Adults at all ages drop litter, so it's up to everybody. We do where we can enforce and fine people for dropping litter and for dumping fly tipping. So, but you know, if you've got to, if we want to keep our streets clean, we've got to love where we live, and that's a slogan we use in Darnell as much as we possibly can. Thank you.
These two ladies, we live on Errington Crescent, and we have a lot of the antisocial behaviour, and we have a lot of rubbish, and we have the bikes going up and down, and we've got a lot of damage from walls the bricks being taken off. We have to move a lot of rubble and everything else. These two ladies every morning on ours move rubbish, and it's done, and it's not through you know, saying, oh, well, you know, we've got to do it. They do it because we want a tidy area to live in. Yes, fair enough, we'd love somebody to come round and do it, but we want somewhere that's tidy and somewhere that's clean. So if it means us picking a bit of rubbish up, us moving the bricks because we don't want them thrown at the windows, which we've had our window and the communal doors. In the 3 years I've lived there, we've had to have our windows at the communal doors changed so many times. We've stood down there, my husband with Brian, at 10 o'clock at night because we've had to have them boarded up because they've smashed the doors. And there's elderly people, we're the youngest on the blocks of ours. There's somebody who's nearly 90 in our block. We shouldn't have to live in that situation. So if we can keep our area clean and tidy, then we will. And if it means us picking a brick up, picking a bit of rubbish up, we'll do that. We're not just going to leave it. And if it's people telling their children, pick that rubbish up. But we can't tell them to do that, because if we tell them, oh, you need to pick that rubbish up, the abuse that we get back is unbelievable. So it's easier for us to do it. So
Well, first of all, can I thank you for what you do in keeping your area clean, because I think it's important that we all take pride in our area and report things that we can't do ourselves. But also, there's, you know, litter picking is, as I said before, there's lots of groups, litter picking groups across the city that do this, go out weekly, go out daily to litter pick certain areas. And when I was a kid, my mum used to sweep the street near where we live. My next door neighbour did theirs, and so on down the street. We've lost that pride that people just did things for themselves. And it's, you know, I wish the council money would stretch further than it does, but it doesn't. You mentioned 14 years of Conservative government and coalition government took money away from this area. It absolutely did. 400 million from this city was taken away by the last government. And although that money had to come from somewhere, and it came from across the council, and because we had to protect children and older people's services, it came from environmental services, amongst others, but it came from environmental services. However, lots of people stood up and said, well, we'll do it ourselves, and I'm really proud that people of Sheffield have done that. So if you've got pride in your area, and you mentioned it, the gentleman at the back, I think it's really important that we all give that message out. We expect the council to do certain things, but we should all be willing to sort of help ourselves as well. Thank you.
Can I just answer on that then, Mary? Yeah. Successive governments have took money off the police. The police are struggling. They've struggled for 20 years. They've had, if you go into a duty group briefing, where there might have been 12, 15 police officers sat before they go on shift, they're down to bare bones. They can't cover all these areas because they haven't got the funding. The helicopter's been taken off the police. Instead of covering one area, South Yorkshire, they're now sharing with Humberside. So think about it. The baton's been passed from one government to another. Both of them are as bad as each other and take money off, and they don't give the police the money they need and the resources. The dog section and dog training, that's had to be scrapped.
It's public questions, by the way, not
public questions. But this is what the guys are interested in. And the thing is, I know, Mary, I'll finish now.
Yeah.
But if you want change, you've got to vote for it.
Well, we see where you're coming from. Thank you for that last comment. Obviously, the last government did take a lot of money away from the police, as they did every other service, and this government is now investing in those services. Any other questions? Thanks, everybody, for a really good meeting, very lively, lots of good comments, and have a great game of bingo, and then have a safe journey home. Thank you.